Communications, maybe. So communications and documentation is probably some of what we do the most, even though it's not what we teach the most. Um, we communicate a lot and we document everything, but we're like part of a team, and we're part of a team with the healthcare, and we're part of a team with first responders. So we just need to communicate with patients and our team members and document. Uh, so as it says, applies fundamental knowledge in emergency medical services, safety, well-being, of medical, legal, ethical. Am I on the right slide? I think so. Yeah. So therapeutic communication principles of achieves a positive relationship. You want to build rapport quickly. Uh, interviewing techniques, adjusting communication strategies for age and stage of development, and patients with special needs and different cultures, and how to verbally diffuse like emotionally or stressful situations, and having issues with family presence, because sometimes that can be a big issue. Um, communication needed for resources, transfer patient care, interact with a team structure, EMS communications, uh, communication with other healthcare professionals, and team communications is dynamic. And then again with documentation, report patient findings, and principles of documentation, reporting error, or writing. Hold on. So, medical terminology is like what we use to describe patients' parts of their bodies in regards to other places of their bodies, and like gastro, and like just what we're talking about when we do um, communicate and documentation with colleagues and other healthcare professionals, and we need to know what they're talking about as well. Um, communications and transmission of information to from one person to another, and like only 10% of our communications verbal, and 90% of it is nonverbal. So like I can convey to you, or like I'll give my daughter as a great example, who's 11 and going into preteen years. She can say something, but she can mean it very well, but like just the way her body language or the way she says it can come across as snide. So as providers, we need to make sure that we're cognizant of that when we're communicating with other people. And it is a soft skill, and it's very important to have good communication skills. Because if you don't have good rapport with patients or colleagues, you're not going to get information that you're looking for. Um, oh, we're still on introduction. Documentations. It is a permanent medical record, and it demonstrates what care was delivered, and it was appropriate. Um, helps other patients in future care because of data collection. They need to proper transfer of responsibility and comply with requirements of health departments and law enforcement agencies, and fulfill your administrative needs, like billing, and like just if we have bad data, we can't make good decisions. And then we're also like radio, um, radio communicating on radios and the ethics on that. Some therapeutic communications, as like I said before, is nonverbal, both verbal and nonverbal. A lot of communications which we don't really have as much as like with Zoom is body language. Um, and it can see like if I'm boring you or not, or if you're or if the patient's afraid of you or not, or like how you're coming across. And it's a good way to achieve a positive relationship with each patient.
Stop.
Um, Shannon Weaver communication models. The sender takes a thought, like encodes the message, and sends that message to another person, and the receiver decodes the message, like what are you trying to actually say to me, and then sends feedback. Okay, this is what I'm getting. You're trying to say to me. So, like, I guess it's a good model, like encoding the message, sending it, and then decoding it, and then saying like feedback. Even just like a simple nod shake, or I guess a good way of saying, like, telling, like, have good communications, like, just, okay, I understand this is what you're trying to tell me, and repeat it back. So the tables, factors or strategies considered during communication, like age. I'm going to treat an elderly person differently than I'm going to treat a peer, and differently than I'm going to treat a kid, and depending on the kid. I'm going to try to have good body language. My clothing, like, I don't know if like you ever like go out in a hoodie or whatever, and people are just think you're a bum or whatever. But if you go out in a suit and people hold doors open, you like say hi to you, or like just just the way you dress and appear is, people will treat you differently. And culture, like what education you have, in the environment that you're in. Like if you want to have good eye contact with people and have good facial expressions when you're talking. I love like watching people, uh, sign language. Like they have such the greatest facial expressions, and like you can almost understand what they're saying just by their facial expressions alone. Um, the sex and the posturing, uh, like you can tell somebody's nervous or at ease just by their way they're talking, if they're slow or fast, and like their volume that they're talking at, if they're soft spoken or if they're loud. Um, Age, culture, and personal experience influences how a person communicates. Like culture is huge. Body language and eye contact are greatly affected by culture. Like I think it's Japan that you shouldn't look at people in the eye when you're talking. But if like in America, like it shows weakness, and like yeah, it's always impolite to look away while somebody else is trying to speak to you. Um, the volume, like I guess it's kind of almost like stereotyping, but volume, like Canadians. I was had a Canadian girlfriend, and her whole family was like loud. Oh my god, they were loud. Um, but US isn't so much. Like it's again a culture thing. Um, Ethnocentrism, like considering your culture is more important than others, and culture and positions, like forcing a culture on other people. So yeah, body language provides more information than words alone. Even without exchanging any words, you can be able to tell your mood. They're called dirty looks, like I get from my daughter sometimes, or I can send them back to her, which she gets them from me. Facial expressions, like it's good just like have a smile, like just so people like will be warm. You can be feel more warm than if you're having like always frowning or whatever towards people, and they'd want to talk to you more. Uh, when when treating with a potential hostile patient, be aware of your own body language. And it's easy to do to get caught up with it. Like you come out to a patient and they're like all of a sudden set off for whatever reason, and it's easy to get caught up with they start yelling at you, you start yelling at them, and it just keeps escalating. And like you got to the point that you just okay, time out, take a deep breath. What's going on here? Like I understand. Like just the ability to say, okay, I get that you're mad, and I understand why you're mad. How do we go about fixing it? And just validating. their position will deflate them very quickly. Um, like stay calm and try to diffuse the situation. Like, and if there's somebody like that goes off the wall, just make sure like and that you can't deflate, just get back out and get a PD involved. Um, and you can't like posture yourself like just blow up and make good eye contact with the patient and just don't stare at them. Just slowly, calmly, and with not yelling, like all that good stuff, and never threaten a patient or because then you got verbally or physically. Uh, Physical factors, literal noise or sounds in the environment, lighting, distance, or physical obstacles may affect your community. Like as soon as I come on scene, and it's always like an elderly person and their TV's blaring. Like the first thing I ever do is look for the remote and shut off the TV, or look for the light and turn that on so I can see what's going on, can hear the patient because it's really easy to get distracted. And it's a lot of commotion, and you just want to cool and calm. You can think and you can talk and not have prices right on in the background or whatever to compete against. Um, yeah, cultural norms dictate amount of space between people. So like in EMS, we are comfortable with each other, like just being around other people's proximity closer than like the general public. But in some cultures, like you can't be close at all to other people. And you gotta be aware of like your body movements and gestures. Like people could be seeing that as off-putting or rude. Um, Verbal communication, open-ended questions, like it's you get more information out of open-ended questions than close-ended. So close-ended questions or be like yes or no, like are you feeling fine today? No. So that doesn't really give you okay, they're sick. They're obviously you called them. So you're like open it. Well, why did you call us here? Well, don't ever use start a sentence with why. So what happened that you wanted us here today, or what caused you to call the ambulance? So just to get a baseline of what's going on. And sometimes people will be forthcoming with more than forthcoming with information. Other times they'll you not understanding what you really want from them. So like yeah, I got an example of what seems to be bothering you. So again, close-ended questions. There's uh, yes or no. Are you having trouble breathing? No or yes. And then so that doesn't give you information why. For a second. Speaking of noise and stuff, I had to shut off my AC. Uh, so yes or no questions. Facilitation, like just cadence, pause, reflection, empathy, clarification, confrontation, interpretation, explanation, summary. Yeah, those are all really good communication tools. Facilitation, like if you're facilitating with a patient of the what they're discussing and why they're discussing it, just and pausing. Like a lot of people think that communication is like one, like you have to have a um, response back, but just like we're listening sometimes is one of the best tools you can do in communication and reflection. Like, okay, like you're having trouble breathing. I understand that you can't breathe right now. How long has it been going on? So you're like reflecting what they're saying, reaffirming. Empathy is like, yeah, I have asthma as well. I understand it really aggravating when you can't breathe or it's really stressful. Or if like you can't understand what they're trying to say, you can redirect or ask a different question to get more information. And sometimes people can like just be unreasonable in our expectations and we can be have confrontation with them. But you just kind of try to re-steer it. You just can't go off. And then like interpreting their body language and explanation of what's going on. Like I always like, especially if it's a behavioral patient, I try to like take my time tell them what we're going to be doing, what's going on, and then do it. Like I just don't bolt right in and not tell them what's going on, and then like just kind of summarize what you're doing and what you've heard. Um, and when interviewing a patient, consider using touch to show compassion or care. Yeah, I've held hands like with little ladies or whatever. Like sometimes it's really stressful and they don't have any place and they're just scared. So it's really nice just to touch their hands or hold their hands. Like, okay, I know you're like uncomfortable. Let's. And if you're in pain and you let them squeeze their hands, and but just be careful where you don't touch your patients like inappropriately places. Um, interviewing techniques to avoid again, false reassurance. Like if somebody's like dying and they're circling the drain, like, oh, everything's going to be okay. You don't want to lie to your patients, or giving them unsolicited advice. Uh, like for somebody who's obviously a drug addict, you can't like, oh, you should go to um, therapy or you should go to rehab. Like it's they already know. So like if they want to, hey, they want advice like, hey, do you know where a rehab center is or how do I get in one? Like, yeah, we can talk, but I don't want to just start giving it to them. Asking leading or biased questions or talking too much myself. Like again, like you want to make sure that they have the opportunity to talk to you. And sometimes the best communication is listening. Like interrupting. We don't want to be the interrupting cow or using the why questions. This um and I do this with my guys too. Like I never want to start a question like why did you not do a 12 lead or why did you give this medication like this? I'm like, because it's you kind of almost like talking to my kids, like, why are you, you know, it just comes off, yeah, authoritative, and they're just going to go on the defensive, and communication is shut down. So, like, what you say? What we happened before we got here? What caused made you want to call the ambulance? What were your what was your thought process? Like, why I try to not use at all. And speaking in professional jargon, it's hard for patients who don't understand. Um, like if you ever go to the doctors and they have a student and they want to impress their uh, doc, and they're using all this, like especially in Dartmouth or whatever, and they want to impress them, they start talking, or that's all they know. That's what they're used to hearing and saying, and they just don't get it, or we don't. So that you can't. They're not understanding. It's a lapse of communication. So there's going to be a lot of times friends and family involved with patient interview. So just be cognizant of that. And sometimes they'll be offering, sometimes they'll be very helpful, and other times they're not so helpful. And you need to make sure um, how to manage that. You can tell them this like step outside, or hey, can you go get me their medication, or hey, can you go make them seem like they're doing something important, but just so you can actually talk to the patient in interview. And sometimes like it is hard sometimes for like we in Berlin we have fire will respond with us sometimes and the police respond with us a lot of times. So sometimes it can be chaotic with a lot of patient people inside and asking the patients questions. Um, even if although I'm on lead on the patient, I let them people sometimes just go and ask questions and just kind of take a note of what's being asked and what the answer is, and then I'll just use situational awareness and look around and see if there's anything else that's going on that people aren't picking up, because I don't want to be in the patient's face as well and like overwhelming. And it's okay to say, okay, the fire guys or the police, like, can you step out? It's, but, and if I need a question asked, like, I'll ask it and then it works out well. Golden rules, treat people that you want to be treated the way you want to be treated, like make eye contact all the times, like provide your name. Hi, my name is Morgan. I'm a paramedic. I'm here to help you. What can I do for you? Always tell the patient truth. Um, like if you're doing a 12 lead and they're having chest pain, you're doing 12 lead, you're like, well, I think you're having a heart attack, or like be confident. It just something's wrong with your heart. We're gonna do the best that we can. Um, so yeah, and use language a patient can understand. So like if somebody is having a cardiac event and like say the troponin is bumped, like a lot of times nurses are busy, docs are busy. They don't say what a troponin is to a patient, and I've had this happen to me on transfers. So we'll start talking about it and like, oh, you had a high troponin. Like, well, I don't know what that is. I'm like, oh, it's an enzyme that your heart gives off, and when your heart's in distress or damage. Like, oh, so it's stuff like that, and it goes a long way. And but yeah, and be careful what you say about the patient to others. Like, you shouldn't really should be saying anything other than to the receiving facility, and just be wary of your body language when you're talking to people, and being at eye level. Excuse me. Like you don't want to like I'm a 6 foot guy, and I can probably be intimidating if I'm just walking in. So I just always kind of jovial a little bit, and like especially with kids, like oh hey, and this kind of act immature. And hopefully, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. If a patient speaks slowly and clearly and loudly, if like patients hard of hearing, always like it was kind of hard dealing with patients during COVID that were hard of hearing because you they couldn't read your lips, which is a compensation. So we'd have to like kind of just do the best we could, and allow the patient to respond to your questions, and always act like in a calm and confident manner. Even if you don't know what's going on, just act calm and confident, and it'll all fall in place. Emotional intelligence. Uh, so its ability to, it's uh, it's the ability to manage your emotions, but understand where the other person's emotions come from. Like this is a leadership thing as well. Um, s- so I want to understand like if a patient's like or something's happening with family member, if like wife's like a husband's dying who's been married for 50 years and his wife is crying, like I understand like she's sad and I want to convey like I understand like I can only imagine why you're sad or whatever. You just don't want to blow her up like "Psst, whatever. He lived a good life. Like you, you can't like you have to manage your emotions and the best you can. Sometimes it's really hard, but like it helps with diffusing conflict. And I understand that's really hard, frustrating for you. And I get it. How do we fix it? Like, and you can build rapport like that and communicating and managing difficult situations, which in managing people, emotional intelligence is huge. And with patients, like if they're scared or they nervous or don't know what's going on, and you just have to be empathetic of their feelings. Attributes of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, like why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling, and how do I regulate the way if I'm in a bad mood, which I go to work in a bad moods. How do I get out of it? Like, what do I do? Like, what's my motivation for being there? And that being aware that I'm in a bad mood or how am I like the other day, I was apparently I didn't realize I was in a bad mood and I said something snide one of the ER nurses and she just stopped and looked at me. It wasn't snide. It was just like something I really wouldn't say. And she's like, do you need to chat? I'm a really good listener. And I'm like, I just kind of looked at her. I'm like, oh, that came off totally not the way it was meant to be. But I had to have that cognizance of being probably shouldn't have said something. Um, it's always good to improve emotional intelligence because if you ever deal with public or even family members, it's good to know how they're feeling, or why you're feeling in a way, um, and taking responsibility for your actions and how my actions will affect others. Like if I'm in a bad mood, I'm probably gonna put my partner in a bad mood too. Then it's just gonna be a bad day. So let's get me off of the bad mood or hurt them off a bad mood. If I can understand why they're in a bad mood, how do we fix it? um, behavioral changes, stairway model. Um, um, yeah, developed by the FBI manager hostage situations. So when I took a class, I was in what was it? I was in with a class with a hostage negotiator. That one was pretty cool. It was an emotional intelligence class, and he would say what some of the strategies were to the negotiation. But anyway, so like employ active listening, like just listening is sometimes half the battle, and then I can understand the way you feel that, and building rapport, and then you can start exerting influence, initiating behavior change. So like build a rapport with somebody, and then all right, let's how do we get you in a better mood, or how do we get to do what needs to be done? So like this person's like at the same level as a little old lady, and just showing emotional support, like holding her hand, and like so communication with identifying yourself. Hi, my name is Morgan. I'm a paramedic with Early EMS. How can I help you? So I just identified myself and presented myself as competent, like told her my title. And don't assume that older patients are senile or confused because there's a lot of ones that are right with it, and they're never confused until you ask the questions. You may encounter hostility, irritability, and some confusions. Um, don't assume that's normal behavior. Yeah, like if somebody were in a house and they don't want us in their house, they're going to be irritable or hostile or not know why we're there. We got to figure it out. Like, yes, I understand that we're tracking all over your floor, but we're here to help you. We're going to approach slowly and calmly, and they talk slowly and softly, so we got to just give them time. Being on their level, watch for signs for confusion, anxiety, and hearing or vision impairment. Um, Hearing, they usually like will tell you that they can't hear, or they'll yell like, "I'm deaf." I'm like, "Oh, I mumble." So we're gonna make a good pair. So like I just built that rapport with them. So I just started speaking louder, more clear. Vision, we do the best we can. Uh, the patient should feel confident that you're in charge of everything possible being done to him or her. Yeah, I mean, you don't want somebody like a doctor come in and be like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on." Like same as us as professionals, just be patient with them. Older patients often feel, yeah, they have neuropathy, or if you have late dementia patients, they feel like every time you touch them, they're just off the wall. So you're just going to be cognizant, not fully aware of changes in their body. Yeah, so because like with older women, especially in females, like if they have any sort of pain or whatever, like they don't know it's a heart attack. They can't relate that, but we have to suspect that always, and we got to be vigilant of their changes. When possible, give patients, oh my god, this is like every old person. They always want to get their slippers, they always want their house coat, they always want their blanket. Their family members will make sure they have their hearing aids or whatever they need, or their cane. Um, but we just got to be patient with them and just kind of help them along or usher them to the stretcher and get them out. Yeah, there's pets that you got to be cognizant of. Um, any questions about communication or communicating with older population? No. Okay. Communicating with children. So if you have kids, um, you're probably ahead of the curve. If you don't have kids, then it's a learning curve. Uh, so like they're just a different breed. We're like usually we're uh, take care of older people or peers. But sometimes we do have to take care of kids, and so just like us tramping in their house and they're like stranger danger, or we're at uniforms or lights are going and sirens and there's just people. Like it's very stressful for kids, and so you want to minimize all the stress levels that you can. Um, let it If a kid has a doll or a toy, I'm like always let them have it. We keep teddy bears in the ambulances for kids. Um, Not that they ever really carry on take them, but it's good just to give them something to secure to, or and always like let the parent hold them if you can, and then always start from like the feet up. Like you kind of have to be like jovial and like act like a kid yourself, or just build a rapport as best you can. But they don't feel good, and they're not going to like you. So you just do the best you can. Like be honest with kids. I remember when I was a kid, and the doc was like, "Oh, I just want to look at your hand." I cut my hand with a yo-yo and swinging it with a Tonka toy, and I sliced my hand open. And the doc was like, "Oh, I just want to look at it." And he drove a lidocaine in my hand, and I would that was it. Like I wouldn't let him touch me again. So just never lie to a kid. Just explain what's going on and just be slow, and like if you work your way up, like if they say their stomach hurts, you just kind of do your assessment around the stomach, and then do the best. Like then you can like touch their stomach, because once they don't, if you like hit it and it hurts, they're not gonna let you really do it again. And like respect the child's modesty, of course. Like any patient, respect their modesty. Uh, Maintain a good eye contact again. Like be down at their level. Like you don't want to tower over them or be authoritative. Like speak friendly, especially professionally. Maintain a good contact, and uh, good luck. Um, Communicating with hearing impaired patients. Uh, so I get along well with, like I said earlier, like most of our patients are elderly or have hearing impairments, so they always have to like put in their hearing aids or whatever. Um, they're like, "Oh, I can't hear," and I'm like, "I mumble, so we're gonna make a great team." And like, of course, my partner, he was like, "Yeah, he does mumble," but so I just like I know I do it sometimes, especially if I'm really tired. I mumble a lot, so I just try to speak clearer. I'm like cognizant of it. Speak clearly. I make sure they can see my face and they can see their face, and like they have their hearing aids. And if worse comes to worse, you can give them a stethoscope and talk into the bell, or you can write stuff down if they're completely deaf. Um, yeah, see, have a pen and paper available. Done that before. So never shout. Yeah, you should never shout, but you can like raise the volume of your voice without shouting. Um, my wife's grandfather used like really, it was bad. He was like, "Oh, I can't hear," so I'd almost have to yell at him. But he and it's you got to be careful though if they have hearing impairments and you lower your voice, like you whisper, they will pick it up every time. So be careful what you say, even when whispering. Communicating with, yeah, you can learn if they know sign language, or if you know sign language, you can always like. I know the second one is hurt. The first one's six something, I think. Oh, sick, and yeah, B is hurt and C is help. So yeah, it's like basic sign language. Uh, and if you ever need an interpreter, I don't know if it comes up. Like you can just dial 911, which I've had to do, which was really interesting. Um, you can ask 911 for an interpreter, like if you have a Spanish speaker or French or whatever language you need, you can call them and they'll get an interpreter for you. Or if you have a Apple phone, you can always use that. Try that, like the interpretation. But the one time I did use it, it was I needed to speak French. That's all they could speak, and so I called 911 and talked to a Spanish person. who transferred me to somebody who was clearly Indian but was speaking Parisian French to somebody who was Canadian French. So, and then finally the daughter showed up and we're good. So visually impaired patients, they yeah, just slow, communicate to them the best as you can. Like again, like I'm gonna assess you. I'm gonna put this cup on you. Just like everything you're gonna do, just tell them before you do it. Um, Sometimes they're not always blind. There's different degrees of uh, visual impairment. Uh, Stay physically in contact with the patient as you begin care. Sure. They're gonna know that you're there. They're like have a sixth sense, but it's yeah. Just keep your hand on their arm or whatever, and talk to them the whole time. I can't imagine like being blind in an ambulance. The patient, if the patient can walk to the ambulance, place his or her hand on your arm. Yeah, kind of like you know your hand on your arm and not like you're holding hands. Um, yeah, if you have a canine, uh, I guess you can transport the hospital. Guide dogs, yeah, they have special harnesses, and you're not supposed to feed them treats. I guess alleviate stress for both patient and dog because yeah, separation anxiety, and that's kind of like their eyes. So I wouldn't want to be without my eyes. Non-English speaking, so yeah, covered that. It's very difficult to gain medical history or what's going on and like what cultures because they're going to probably have different cultures. Uh, and if you're like in a heavily populated, say Mexican or French, you can like have a little graph of certain words that you might use. Um, um, in the Hamlets, so like so French would be hôpital, so you can just say hôpital and they say oui or no, or like I don't know whatever other. We have a lot of French in Berlin, but if you have like a lot of Mexican or another Spanish, just have that. Or like I said, you can call 911 or get an interpreter. Um, yeah, consider learning some common phrases. Like I started learning some more French, but like it's hard. It's hard to learn like another language if you don't use it every day. There's like smartphones have like my iPhone, I can interpret sometimes. Yeah, and if they're at a bigger hospital, they can have translators or they have ways of doing it at the hospital. Uh, Mission critical communication, communicating with well, disruption will result in failure at hand. Mental model is a picture. So a disruption of result. So I guess if there's a failure of communication, like um, if a partner or patient, then it's not going to go very well and may result in a failure. Um, so yeah, and just make sure you tell them what you're doing when you're doing it. Like, okay, I'm gonna hook you up to our monitors. We're gonna take your blood pressure. So everybody is on the same page of what's going on, and the patient doesn't have to wonder. And it's just good communication and patient care. Oh, I'm doing a 12 lead. Yeah, it looks normal. Or you have uh, something different in one of your leads. So we got to take a closer look. Um, with the focus priority of the patient. So if they're having chest pain, my focus is going to be the heart. Have you had chest pain before? And like what immediate needs? I guess it'd be like kind of a timeout in an OR, which I think would be interesting in like EMS some days. Because there's a lot going on at once sometimes, and it would be just taking a time out, like, okay, what is going on? Where are we? What needs to be done for this patient at this given time, especially codes. Even though I know like everybody's but sometimes it'd be good to just do a timeout to see where you are. Effective communication is essential and effective and appropriate patient care. Yeah, because you need to know what's going on and everybody needs to be on the same page. Um, and then transfer, like, I guess that's one of the biggest errors, med errors, or not med errors, but errors that can happen in healthcare is the handover. So it's good just to have a way of doing it that you go to every time. Like if, for instance, if we go to Dartmouth, they will tell you, okay, we're going to take a report after you put the patient on the bed, like for their trauma bay. There's like 20 doctors, and they're all. But once you move the patient, everybody's silent, and if they're not silent, the lead doc will tell them to be silent, and then you can tell them what's going on. Like everybody's on the same page. Initiate eye contact if there's more than one person. Like whoever's, they will generally say, okay, you can give me a report. Um, so you can give eye contact to that person. Um, and you can manage the environment. So, like I've brought in a code once to the AVH, and like everybody was just talking, and no, like the doctor was trying to talk to me, and it was just chaos. And so finally, the doctor just yelled and like everybody be quiet, and then it stopped, and then we were able to communicate. Um, so yeah, minimize noise, interruptions, and distractions. And the same thing on scene. Like I want to shut off the TV. I don't want the distractions. I don't want the noise. I want to focus on my patient and then ensure ABCs, which we'll get into the um, when you go into assessment, airway, breathing, and circulation. Provide a structured background, so the situation, background assessment, and the recap of treatment. So it's really good, like in anything we do, like just have a way of doing it. So like when I give a report, like to the receiving nurse or the physician, like, okay, this is what we got called for. The patient history of what we did and like what we found and what treatments that we did to. So if we have patient like, yeah, he's a 55-year-old female who's having chest pain, known cardiac history, and say it's crushing, like 9 out of 10 pain, we gave nitro, we gave aspirin, we got an IV, and then this is the 12 lead. Like you want to make it concise, but you also want to give them good information to go off of, and then always give them documentation. Some facilities won't let you leave until they have their patient care report in their hands, but they can always have access to it. Uh, so receiving handover, like when we take IFTs or if we have a first responder on scene, like maintain eye contact with the person who's giving a report. Make sure they know who the primary care person is. Like if I'm with another provider, like and I'm taking care, like I'll let them know. And if not, I'll hand the paperwork to the other person, like they're taking their patient. And like just make sure that you're understanding what they're talking about and then recap, like just kind of like radio communications. Okay, we're taking a patient for an NSTEMI, and this is what the heparin rate's at. And he's going to lower D and gather a supplementary. So if like if we're doing an IFT, there's always paperwork packets that go with them. But if there's um receiving patient care from the fire department, I would like their documentation so I can put it in mine. Uh, patient care report or excuse me is a PCR. It is a legal document, so it can be subpoenaed in court, and it records everything from the time of dispatch. Like there, our dispatcher, all dispatchers are recorded, so that can be subpoenaed as well. And then like, so I report like every what we would get dispatched from the time we got dispatched to the time we deliver the patient. Like everything's recorded and documented. Um, there are two types of PCRs: a written and electronic. I don't know of any more written like reports, maybe, but like the state's all electronic now. It's Tempsys. I have no idea what Maine has. Uh, so PCR serves as six functions. So continuity of care. Um, so it will follow the patients even to tertiary care. Compliance and legal documents that make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And like so administration can uh, make decisions. Like we're always making decisions from information that we receive. And we have a weekly meeting about our calls, like for the leadership, and like we have a ton of patients that we don't transfer. Like, and it's good like to show the town who pays supplement. Like it shows that we document. We transport like 10 patients, but we actually go on 20 calls. Why is that? And the biggest one, is reimbursement. Well, not it's mine. That's the one I deal with a lot is billing. We want to get paid for it to keep our ambulances running and for to keep our staff there. Education, for the like Kevin talked about last on Thursday, it was QI, QA, making sure we're competent in what we're doing. And if there's something we do wrong, like I want to know about it so we can educate them and so it doesn't happen again. Uh, and data collection, continuous, yeah. And it does like I've was on a call once with continuity of care where the it was a snow machine accident and the guy like had a brain bleed and the lead surgeon came up to the hospital and we were talking about cases and he brought that up and he had the Tempsys report or the PCR and he's like, I don't know why this patient was transported. That I think it was like a 90-degree. He should have been supine, but our protocol says we transport head bleeds like at a certain rate. I think it's 60 degrees. Excuse me. So it's good to like, but it was kind of humbling to see that report up there. And he actually read it and knew what was going on, because our reports also like paint pictures, um, that the providers can't. Like we're going to people's homes, and they won't be able to see what we see or how the patient was and all that. And that's why we have to convey it in our reports. So information is collected, is a chief complaint, like the mechanism of injury or illness, level of consciousness, mental status, vital signs, ongoing assessment, and patient demographics and transport information, which all the billing, all our billing looks at all of that stuff, as well as QA and QI, and our medical control does as well. Uh, the administrative information, the incident report, the unit was notified like times. Times is a big one. Like how long did it take to get out the door? Why did it take so long? Why were we on scene so long? What time did we receive at the receiving facility? The time the patient care was transferred. Like it's good information of what happens. Sometimes like extrication, there's a lot of apartment buildings that we have to. There's no elevators. We have to take the patient down. That looks like a EPCR. It looks almost like Tempsys. But like at Berlin EMS, we use what's called TraumaSoft, and it's just a all-inclusive software. Some of the reports are reporting for the narratives. Like I think Kevin talked about it. There's what three kind of ways of doing it. Um, the chart method is one, which is what I do. And your documentation will always be transforming. So the chart is what I do. Like it talks about like I D chart actually, like dispatch, what happens during dispatch, who else was there during dispatch, the chief complaint, like a history, like how did I find the patient, what was their ailment, did they have any history, any allergies, stuff like that. Then my assessment, like I do like a head to toe assessment, like from the primary to secondary, which we'll get into. in a week or two, and then what treatments I did, and then like how did I transport the patient and who received the care from that patient. Um, SOAP is what I used to use it a long time ago. Subjective, objective assessment and plan. Like, what did the patient see or say or do? What did I see or say or do? Then the assessment, and then what plan of action did I have? Um, if there was a chest pain, my plan was this. Um, all narrative section should contain like time of events. Um, yes, I think Kevin does it. I don't put that in mine. Assessment findings. Yes, like I said, like I do a head to toe like neurological. If anything's that I find, I always put it in that head to toe. Um, and I do it on all my reports because like if you that's the way you do it, that's you'll never go wrong and deviate. Observations at the scene, like if lack of a better word term is if it's a place of the shithole, I'm gonna put it place was cluttered. That was really difficult extrication because da, 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 da. I don't say like the patient was a hoarder. We couldn't get him out. Um, or like, just you gotta use like political terms in a way, just like because you gotta be careful of defamation. So is the patient worse or better when I got to him? Like, could they not breathe and I put them on CPAP and they were breathing better? Did I give them a nebulizer and they flashed over? Like, um, I really, even if it's wrong or if I messed up, I'm gonna document it just because. If you do it and it's wrong and you don't document, they're gonna think you're hiding something, which is worse. If there's a refusal of care, like in our time of conversation, like I suggested the patient should go to the hospital because of da 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 da. The patient told me they weren't going to the hospital. They had better things to do. So I document that. And if I call medical control, I document who I talked to, what was said, what time, and like the staff or person. I always put that in my report. Like I gave report to ER RN. I use their name, like Karen Ramsey, who's one of their nurses. I'll use her name. And sometimes there's a whole team. I'll just put the ER team was there, whoever's receiving care, the highest express. Excuse me. Health information exchanges improves sharing data between EMS and other healthcare providers. So, like our reports will go, like our hospital can look at all our reports, or if we send them to Dartmouth, they can look at the reports at Well or the tertiary care. They can look at regular data. I think they go to clearinghouses as well. Um, patient action, so it increases hospital care. Like um, Tempsis, like we can't do it on TraumaSoft, but I went to a call last night and before we got there, they knew who the patient was, so I was able to punch the patient into Tempsys, and it came up like what her history was. So I had a good idea what I was going into before I got there. Um, and we can get like access for patients like Hurricane Katrina. There was nobody; their health records were unavailable, so it's a challenge. Uh, most whatever that means. Search, this provides search for hospital and other records that will help. Yeah, we can start looking for like records from patients from other hospitals are coming and goings. Like I know, like if we something like a Memorial and Main Med, all that network, they have all their information that every all their providers can look at if they need to. Um, and our reports get dumped into there. Like if we transport to somebody to medical Main Med, they always want our reports. Um, which is not a HIPAA violation because it's a continuation of care. Reporting errors. Yes, I we you will make an error in documentation or in every anything in patient care. If you like mess up, there's a good picture. If you mess up something that you're writing, you just cross it out, initial it, and date it, and then put whatever you want. Never like kind of do the whole squiggly thing, or like, it looks like you're hiding something that's not professional. So if you just cross it out, it's like MP, circle it and date it, so they know like I did not want that there. I meant to say this. For the electronic ones, like if you send it, we have to do what's called an addendum, um, and just put like what we meant to say, and then sign it and date it. But it's the original is still there, but we still have the addendum that goes with it. Like I said, like writing a report in a single horizontal line, um, initial and date it. If your error is discovered after you submit the report, like yeah, just do the same. Just write an addendum, sign it, send it. But when I don't think there's not very many at all written reports anymore. Um, how about we take a 5 minute break? It's a good segue. All right, sounds good. Is everybody back? Ready? Oh, the cat wants to go. Sorry. Um, so documented refusals of care. Um, it's kind of a delicate thing. Thorough documentation is crucial. It's like the most common source of lawsuits. Um, like we can all get sued for anything at any time, basically. But like we can, like if a patient or thought that we did not give them enough attention, um, or they wanted to be transported, or said that they wanted to be transferred and we just didn't do it or whatever, or if somebody died, like if in a car accident, like nope, nope, I'm fine, and later on died, like we could be held responsible. But again, a patient is can refuse if they're um, can show that they're cognizant and able to make decisions for themselves. And it's always I don't know if it's a myth, just to scare providers, but like there's or if it's true. It's one I heard about in like my class is some providers like got called to a scene of an accident, um, but didn't transport the patient. And I don't know if they had a signed refusal or not, but then uh, they ended up getting sued. I don't know if the patient ended up dying, but they got sued and they lost civilly and criminally for negligence. But I've also heard the reverse where they did have a signed refusal, and so um, nothing came of it except for stress. Uh, and when I was early in my career for Berlin EMS, we had a crew that went to a car accident, and the patients were all from out of town. And they said the crew got signed refusals. Then, like 2 days later, we got a call from the the police department saying that they want to be transported, and our crew told them no. But um, we had the signed refusals, so it was like completely dismissed. Um, so document. Like like those some of the most documentation I've done is on refusals, and have if you have forms, if you do it electronically, have uh, third party sign. If there's a police officer there, have them sign if nobody else wants to do it. And I've had patients like, nope, I'm not signing that stupid piece of paper. Just get it away from me. Then I definitely have a police officer sign or say it on the air or whatever. Just document it the best you can. Um, special reporting situations, dog gunshot wounds. We covered this pretty significantly before. You do need to document gunshot wounds. I've seen pictures coming up now because everybody has cell phones. I'm kind of leery of it because it could be HIPAA, but if you don't have any identification, like I don't know. Um, but just good documentation of gunshot wounds, dog bites, like and using that's where you use medical terminology, like um, just to describe where it was or like the size of it. Suspected physical or sexual abuse and MCIs. You just document the best you can on all of it. Um, but again, we don't really report that to the state. Like we report to local law enforcement and or the hospital. If we transport the hospital, we definitely report that. MCIs probably would be reported to the state, and they would probably just do an investigation or would be part of an investigation. Uh, So this is going into the nuts and bolts of how we communicate or what equipment we use communicate with. Um, you have to have good ethics and rules and laws when communicating. So we communicate like, and this is where we can't really communicate with um, excuse body language. So like all by verbal. Um, so we communicate a lot with other team members like law enforcement, or we communicate a lot with Berlin Fire in the hospital. And We just have to have good communications to be effective. So a base station radio is one that is like the base. So like we have two base station radios at our base. You can just think of the base station radio. That's what it's like the larger of the two, and like it can transmit and receive from further distances. So two-way radio has a transmitter and receiver. So it transmits a signal out, excuse me, and receives a signal back in. A dedicated line, also known as the hotline, like if we call into like the ERs at Weeks has a dedicated ER line, so we can call. If we went to Weeks, we could it's directly to the ER, and it's a recorded line, and there wouldn't be any like receptionist or anybody else involved. Um, so some ambulances have more than one mobile radio communication. Um, a lot of agencies have um, on Vermont, New Hampshire town lines have two radios. One for Vermont, one's dedicated to Vermont, one's dedicated to New Hampshire. Because of an incident that happened years ago where the agencies were able to communicate back and forth. Um, but like in Berlin, we only have one station, but it can go like back.
All right, can you hear me? Yep. Okay, good. My AirPod died, but my kids are asleep, so. Speaking of communication, so like yeah, it's one radio, but you can send it back and forth from the front to the rear. But it's still considered one radio. But like 45th, where I used to work for, had two radios, so we could communicate with Vermont if we had to. So portable radios are the handheld devices that at least one person on the crew should have one, but ultimately two. So I feel like everyone has seen if something goes south, like you can talk to dispatch or law enforcement, or if the patient compensates, you can get ALS or somebody else coming, or if you have to talk to DART or main med, so you can do it with that. Repeater base stations. So if that's usually up on the towers, and that what happens is they get signals. Like if I want to talk to, if I'm in Milan, if anybody knows around here, I can't be on a Berlin frequency and talk to Berlin dispatch. I'd have to switch over to Milan frequency, which they would take my signal, transfer it, and then send it back out at another signal. Yes, yeah, automatically retransmit as second frequency. Up in the northern east, where I used to work at the 45th, they have 5 repeaters, and then depending on where you are in the location, that's what repeater you had to be on. So that's a good picture of like how a repeater works. You send a signal out, it recodes it or changes the signal and sends it back out to receiving person. Kind of like communication. Digital equipment telemetry allows electronic signals to be converted into coded audible signals. So like when I think of that, I don't know if anybody's ever watched Rescue, like the way back when, the 70s show, and they like they do the 12 lead and it gets shown to Rampart, but it's kind of the same thing. But now like our Zols are pretty impressive, where we can send 12 leads directly into the ER. Sometimes they use them, sometimes they don't, but it's also like good, like, hey, when I'm giving a report, I'm like, hey, I see elevation in these leads, and I'm sending you a 12 leads so you can look at it. So cardiac data from like that codes. Like every time we have a code, like I always pull the data from it and look at it. But we can send them from, like, if you do 10 reports and you don't want to, you can just send them to the cloud and just take them back down. Be much easier on your reporting. Yeah, EMTs often communicate with receiving facilities by telephone. I have, and I don't have an issue with it. I'd rather communicate it on the radio, so it's recorded, and everybody is kind of on the same page, like all my teammates, whatever. But I mean, like if I have to call medical control and I'm at the police department, I'll use a cell phone, or if I'm at a patient house, I'll use my cell phone quite a lot. Satellite phones, you can talk to them like people. They're like cell phones, but they go through satellite and they're a lot more expensive. Like again, Beecher Falls Fire, where I used to work, their first responder agency has a satellite phone. A scanner is it just scans like radio frequencies, so you can not patients, but just general public can hear what's going on. Like I don't run a lot into it in Berlin, but in Colbrook, everybody had a scanner. Like everybody knew what was going on. You could be like, get toned out, and then you go up to the patients and like, oh, it took you 10 minutes to get here, and like there's a scanner right there. So everybody always knew what's going on. So you always have to be careful what you say, and somebody's always listening. Ambulances have an external public address system. Yeah, they have like computers, I guess, and like if you get toned out, they can dump all the information into the computer, whatever you're using. Like it's hard in Berlin. That's one of the challenges. Is like there's no. If we can even see the address, there's like no rhyme or reason of where it's on the building. So sometimes it's a guessing game. So radio hardware that's the agencies use, a simplex, is like you kind of like using a regular radio. You have to push the button and talk in the release to listen for reply. A duplex is like you can talk a lot like a cell phone. You can talk and listen at the same time. And a multiplex uses two or more frequency. Like I guess a repeater would be almost like a multiplex, but that's just taking in all these frequencies and being able to send them back out. Med channels are reserved for EMS use. Like usually, if we're talking to a radio, we're onto a receiving hospital. They're on a med channel, or if we're talking to DART or main med, we're on a med channel. Like they're strictly reserved for healthcare. Trunking systems assign many frequencies. Yeah, that's up on the radio towers and stuff. So interoperability, that's like, again, like if we get called to like on a traffic accident, it's icy or snow, like we're on a it's VHF, very high frequencies for like healthcare and like all our system, but like the state crews are all like ultra high, so they won't be able to hear what we're saying or what they're saying. But even though we kind of need to know what's going on, and they're like, if a road's closed, they need to know, or if we need ice or snow or whatever. So like that's something like, and talking to state police and like I don't know if you guys remember the Draeger unit or incident years and years ago up here. That's what brought the interoperability up to New Hampshire, over the Vermont-New Hampshire borders. Mobile data terminals, so that's like the computers, or like you can see it all the time in police cruisers. Yeah, for maps and stuff. So the radio communications is regulated by the FCC. They're always listening, and you have to, like, for Berlin, like all agencies have to license their frequency, and nobody else can. And they monitor our radio operations, and so you gotta be careful what you say. So that the dispatcher, so like fortunately Berlin's dispatchers are like really good, and but like I volunteer for Errol's, and Colbert's dispatchers are not the best sometimes, and it can really make or break a call. It can be really frustrating really fast if there's poor dispatching, but like it's garbage in, garbage out. Like the patient or whoever's calling needs to know what they're saying, and like the 911 dispatcher needs to be able to get that information so it can be relayed down. It's a lot like playing telephone, and it can get muddled really quick. But like in Berlin's dispatcher, they're very concise and they're short, and they're really good. So yeah, they select this. The dispatcher needs to know like if we're going with fire or the police, or we're just gonna go on our own. And so yeah, the 911 dispatchers will, if like there's like a code or somebody's having chest pain, they'll direct the patients now to like do aspirin, or if they have nitro, or just walk people through and do CPR if need be. So yeah, if reports any problems that took during dispatcher, I will definitely document if the snow's like snowy or any issues with dispatch, or if we get, even if we get lost or if it's my fault, I will make sure I document it. So I will take responsibility of it. And I need to make sure like dispatcher knows, like, and it's even a safety thing. Like they need to know if, because I'm actually pretty bad about taking radios in with me, and they've tried to reach us while we're on scene or whatever, and I never responded, and all of a sudden we're coming out the doors and the cops are looking for us. So they need to know what's going on as well. So medical control, the radio communications that facilitate communication between you and medical control. So if you ever need rise, and medical control, yeah, and all receiving hospital is like there's a medical director which oversees the medical emergency part, but then there's medical control who's like whatever physician's on that night. So it's going to be a different person. But it's like, so you always need to make sure that you can be able to contact them if they need to. So you need to make sure that you're tell them that you have something coming, and if you need like advice or orders, which I do now more as a paramedic than I've ever have in my entire career before that. And if like there's special situations, like when so there was like a lapse of times, like transport times between 45th and Berlin. Like it's nothing to transport a patient like for 30 minutes in Colberg 45th, but in Berlin, like most of our transport times are 10 minutes or less. So it was like when I first got there, it was like showing up to the ER without giving a patch, and they told me that I needed to do that, especially like codes and stuff, because it sets them up for failure as well. So you need to make sure that it's like they get something, even if you're like you're the traumatic injury, you need to make sure that they know something's coming as soon as you can. So giving a patient report should include the following 10. So yeah, you should identify who you are, like whatever agency. So if I'm on with Berlin, I usually just say Berlin EMS. What levels we're coming with you, ALS or BLS, especially like if it's a stroke alert or a trauma alert. You want to let them, if it's a stroke alert, you need to let them know as soon as you can. As soon as you get on scene and there's a stroke, you think a suspected stroke, you got to let the hospital know. Tell them that you're arriving in like 10 minutes or less, and just the patient's age, gender, and chief complaint. A brief history of the problem, physical. So you basically, like, if you ever work in a hospital in ER, you just want to know that you want to know something's coming in and the basic idea of what it is. It's kind of like getting dispatched for us. You want to know a basic idea of what it is so you can prepare. Like, there's a lot of people who like to be on the radio and they will just give like every little detail they can on their air. But really they just want to know what age and a general problem. So because they're going to follow whatever they need to do. And if there's an IV or not, they want to know that. So medical control, there's either offline or online. Like offline's indirect or online is direct. Indirect is like, I think this, oh my God, I gotta look this up. What does it say? So yeah, administering. Indirect is like, I think your scope of practice, your protocols or whatever. And direct is if you call them and you're talking them like one-on-one. Correct me if I'm wrong, because it's been so long. So like, I know it's different in Maine and New Hampshire for like, we're pretty liberal with our protocols, but I guess in Maine, from my understanding, that you have to call medical control for a lot of different things. Like as in New Hampshire, we don't. Yeah, and you have to call for stopping treatment or not transporting a patient. You should have a conversation. Like I said, I've called medical control now more than as a paramedic than I ever have in my career. The most areas, I hope I didn't confuse you with the online and offline. So the most areas of medical control is provided to physicians working at the receiving hospital. So there's freestanding ERs now, or just physician alone. Like Colebrook is pretty, like at night there's one physician there. Like, but if you go to, or two at most, if you go to like big hospitals, like there's a lot of people. On medical control, the number of ways to access hospital is channel. So you can call them on the phone, or you can call them on the radio. Or even sometimes, like we will have if we're busy, we'll have the police or the dispatcher list, like, hey, call the hospital and give them a heads up. So yeah, reprovise. It's kind of like almost giving, you want to paint a picture for them so they have what they need to make a decision. You just can't say, hey, I'm here with a chest pain. What do I want? What do you want me to do? Like, you can like paint a picture of, oh, well, they're having crushing chest pain. That's 10 on 10. They're diaphoretic. Do you want me to give a third dose of nitro? Yes or no? So you got to give them a good picture of what's going on because they can't see. Repeat. Yeah, it's always good to repeat orders, like even on the air or on the phone. Like if they give you an order, like you want me to give 600 milligrams of aspirin, and like, oh no, I meant 324. It's just good to have confirmation. Like, you want me to give the third dose of nitro? Yes. Okay. Yeah, don't follow an order. Like, you can question them or just have a conversation. Like, I don't feel comfortable with that. This is why. Don't just outright, no, I'm not doing that. Then you can have a conversation when you get to the hospital. Information regarding special situations like hazardous materials will, if initiating communication with the hospital advises an extraordinary situation, yeah, I will do this. If we start getting ramped up on calls, I will call them and let them know. Like if there's an MVA, or like especially if there's multiple patients, I will call them and let them know so they can recruit or get ready for whatever they need to do. special hazardous materials, I would definitely call, but takes a lot of time to do so. Rescues in progress or whatever, I will definitely call and let them again. Regarding special early notification, the better. Yes, so they can get ready and be prepared. Like if it's a stroke, which is a special circumstance, like some hospitals don't have techs on at night, so they have to call them in and get the CT running or warmed up before we get there, and identify special if the patient's like cognitively enabled or need an interpreter. They need to know that as well. Yeah, and they should have a policy and procedure for a lot of that stuff for stroke alerts, and that's something that your medical control director needs to work on. So maintenance of radio equipment. So like EMS equipment, it does fail even after a while, or like others, like frequencies change, and it just needs to be updated and make sure it's working properly. Like we technically should be on the radio every day to make sure that their radios are working, and like just doing radio checks with the hospital or radio checks with dispatch, because it's really frustrating for everybody if you like trying to talk to the hospital, like giving a patch and nobody's picking up. And then you like show up and like, why didn't you call? Like I tried. So then you have to figure out why it wasn't working, which end. And yeah, and I always have a, like, if you, what is it, plan to fail or fail to plan or whatever. So just always have a backup plan. So if my radio's not working, or if I just can't get to the radio for whatever reason, I'm gonna call them on cell phone. All right. So we'll do the review. When healthcare providers are forced their cultural values onto the patients because they believe their values are better, they are displaying A, ethnocentrism, B, proxemics, a nonverbal communication, or cultural imposition. I think it is D. Yes, it is D. When communicating with an older patient, you should approach the patient slowly and calmly. Step back and avoid making the patient uncomfortable. Raise your voice to ensure the patient can hear you. Obtain the majority of your information from name-lib. Actually, this is like a E, all the above.
I'll say
A. A, yeah. Let's see what did they. A. Approach older patient slowly and calmly. Use him or her as your primary source of information. Yeah, you just gotta be kind of take your time. Yeah, you don't want to like. When caring for a 5-year-old with respiratory distress, you should avoid direct eye contact with the child as he might frighten him. Avoid letting the child hold any toys as they might hinder your care. Avoid alerting the child prior to your patient procedure. Allowing a patient, a parent or caregiver to hold the patient in situations. D. Absolutely. Which of the following pieces of patient information is the least pertinent when giving a verbal report to a nurse or physician at the hospital? The patient's name and age.
B.
The patient's family medical history, vital signs may change, medications that patient is taking.
B.
Yeah, A. B. Probably, I'm going to go with B. It is B. Sometimes, like, I know that's kind of a tricky question. So, like,
No, they want the least. the least.
A lot of patients will give like their family history of like, well, my grandfather had cardiac disease and da 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 da, which is important, but like you kind of need to know what's going on now. Which of the following statements about a patient care report is true? A, it is not a legal document in the eyes of the law. B, it cannot be used for patient billing information. C, it helps ensure efficient continuity of patient care. D, it is intended for use only by a pre-hospital care provider. C,
C.
I would have to agree. A device that receives a low frequency signal then is transmitted at a relatively high frequency is called a duplex, scanner, repeater, receiver. Oh, I explained this one so wrong. C, it is C. So like our ambulances aren't going to be able to transmit very far. Like we can hit the repeater, then like we'll be down like in, I don't know, Tilton, and we can hear a report from the repeater. When treating a potentially hostile patient, you should try to avoid the situation. You should try to diffuse the situation by A, assuming the aggressive posture,
C.
B, staring
C.
at the patient, C, speaking calmly, confidently, and slowly, D, verbally threatening the patient.
Let's go with D.
C. Yes. All the following are functions of the emergency medical dispatch except alerting an appropriate EMS response unit, B, screening call and assigning it priority, C, providing the emergency medical instructions to the caller, D, providing medical directions.
C.
D.
I'll go with D.
Yes. So we didn't really touch on it, or maybe I didn't, but it might be in your reading. So they'll screen calls, like Kevin talked about it on Thursday, remember, and they'll say like Alpha Echo, Alpha Bravo Echo, or Charlie Delta Echo Omega. Like Omegas are lifter sits, like Echoes are everybody's on deck. So D. All the following of that we just read that. Oh my god. After receiving an order for medical control over the radio, the EMT should A, carry out the order immediately, B, disregard the order if it's not understood, C, obtain the necessary consent from the patient, D, repeat the order to the physician word for word.
A.
And then document it in quotes word for word. D. When requesting medical direction of the patient who was involved in a major car accident, EMT should avoid using radio codes to describe the situation. We should never use radio codes. It's actually a long story. Requesting an order that seems inappropriate, relaying on vital signs unless they are abnormal, the use of medical terminology when speaking. Using radio codes. Yep, A. Because there's no definitive, and then yeah. All right. How about we take 5 and then we'll start with the next chapter and then we'll finish it next week or on Tuesday. Sounds like a plan?
Thursday.
You look tired.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll be back here, 9:35? Sounds good. everybody ready to get started? We'll just go part way and see how far we make it. Till like 10. Can you see the slides? Yes? Okay, good.
Yes.
All right, so chapter 8, lifting and moving patients. Doesn't seem like that important, but it's very, like, we do it on a daily basis, and you got to take care of your body. It's easy to mess that up. I guess this goes under. So, in the course of a call, you'll definitely have to move patients, and it's the best way, like easiest, to move patients without injury to them or yourselves. We need to learn like proper techniques and different ways that we do move patients around, and knowledge of body mechanics and power grip. Does anybody like lift weights or used to lift weights ever? Once upon a time I did, like, and it was, when I did, it was like really helpful. A lot more than I do now. So the first part is like the wheel stretcher is like one of their everyday use items in an ambulance. There's like, I think there's like 2 or 3 known big manufacturers, like Stryker's seen everywhere. Furno is another one. It used to be a lot of Furnos, but now it's a lot of Strykers. The yellow ones, which is pictured there. And it does a lot of different things. That is actually a manual one. A lot of agencies have power lifts now, stretchers. That saves on backs, and they're like hydraulics and battery. And when they get really fancy, that they have auto loads in the ambulances, which Errol has, and it just pushes a button and it lifts a patient right up and right in. It's really smooth. So the stretcher weighs like anywhere from 40 to 145 pounds. Like the Strykers without the hydraulics is pretty light. But once you put the hydraulics and the battery on it and the pistons, it gets heavy. And we do have to move them around. Sometimes it's hard. Generally, we do not take them inside unless it's a straight shot. We don't take them upstairs because it increases the chances of falling or tripping over patients, which I did do once, and it was embarrassing more than anything. There's hard wheels on it and on the bottom. So like going over grass and stuff or rocks, it's hard. But like going on smooth, like on a floor in the hospital, it's easier doing it that way. Yeah, like before you go on calls, like we generally, like when we bring on new people, we make sure like they know how to use a stretcher, because there have been times I've went with people they didn't know how to use it, or when we transitioned from the old stretchers to the power, like there was a learning curve. And they do a lot of different things. Like our Strykers can collapse. The head can go up, so you can put it like in a supine position or all the way to the supine, semi-Fowler, like kind of at an angle or straight up, and any others. And you can put their feet up, and you can they can collapse them, and they can like do a lot of different things. And it's good to practice on it before you actually have to do it, because then your partner's going to get impatient, or you just kind of look silly not knowing how to use it. So it's a good idea just to get a good feel for it before you actually, like when you're downtime, like that when you start going for your clinical time, just play with a stretcher or anything that you want to do with. So yeah, they're usually hollow, and the tubing, it's tubing, and then the mattresses are fluid resistant, because like people will poop and pee and bleed and vomit, and we don't want it to get into the mattress. And there's like straps that need to be using. So like if there's something that happens, if you do tip a patient over, they don't fall out, or if you're involved in an accident, they don't get hurt. So backboards, they're mostly used for extrication now, especially with the fire department. We don't generally backboard people at all for like suspected spinal injuries. Not all states are like that. So if you do travel, like especially in other countries, they're still backboarding people, but there's been no. It does more harm than good, especially in elderly population. Like have somebody laying down like that. So, but like if you have to like extricate a person from that's out in the woods, it's good to. They're useful. They still have a place, but it's rare. Or, they're usually on supine, and you have to put a lot of padding, especially if there's any curvature in their body, or put it in their lower backs. They're about, I guess, 7 feet tall, and there's different ways to securing. Like a lot of people use buckles, or when I first learned, there was spider straps, and they just like one strap with Velcro that you'd have to secure the patient on. And then like for testing, they would actually pick the patient up and flip them over to make sure they didn't move. And if they moved, you failed and had to retake the station. But so when you're moving patients, like you either want to make sure that the injury doesn't occur more to the patient, to the team, or to yourself, because like your safety is more paramount. And it takes practice. It's like something we don't really do. We like some crews do, but it's good to practice. But like if you do it a lot, you're good. Using proper body mechanics, you need to make sure like what I said, like lifting weights, because like doing a deadlift, if you know what I'm talking about, or squats, like it transitions into lifting patients a lot, and how to have good form when lifting to takes the strain off your back. We usually, like if we're moving patients, especially like with the fire department or whatever, there is a lot of communication involved about what we're going to do, what's the best way. Are we going to use a scoop stretcher? Are we going to use a stair chair? Like who's going to be at the foot? Who's going to be at the head? There's all the way through it. We're talking like who's going to make the call when we actually move the patient. So yeah, body mechanics. So the shoulder. Do I have the? I don't know how to do that. The shoulder. Well, you can see the shoulder girdle, like where your shoulders are in your spinal column, and how it kind of all lines up in the pelvis and the legs. But if you like, and I got a video. I'll show it briefly next time. Like the mechanics. It's pretty good. Like what happens when you take your spine out of alignment. Lifting position, like should have your feet like shoulder width apart, like spread apart, and whatever, and aligned your pelvis overlined your feet, and like shoulders back, head up, and then like kind of squat down with your leg. Make sure your spine isn't straight up and down, so you're putting most of the strain on your back, even though it does kind of compress your spinal cord. That it takes the brunt of it in your legs, like that. So yeah, that's a striker, and he's using like his palms are up, his feet are apart, and it's kind of like a deadlift form. He could be straight in his back, but his head is up. Like if he's had his hands further apart, and like took so like the further out your hands are away from your back, and you're out of alignment, it puts so much more pressure on your back, and it's a good way to slip a disc. If you may injure your back if you lean forward, or which I kind of do. When you lift with your back straight and you're bent, but bent significantly forward at the hips, like or if you like you have good posture, like if you do work out, it takes a significant, your body's just used to it, and you have good mechanics. Legs should be spread shoulder width apart. Center of gravity is well balanced with your back held upright, your body, like you want your back kind of lined up, your head up, your shoulders up. And then they say like grasp the stretcher or the patient like with both palms up. I kind of do one over, one up, and kind of in case you can control it more. If you can, like there's different things that we can use to like, so we don't have to go right from the floor. The Reeve stretcher. There's a canvas one that we have at Berlin that nobody ever uses, but it like it's kind of like the Reeve stretcher. You can like roll it under them, but there's grips, and you can lift your body. So like if you're not lifting from there, like the further down from the ground you are, the more pressure it puts on your back. So you want to keep your arms close, and your arms like about the same part, your distance, like shoulder width apart. So that is a scoop stretcher. So both palms are up, all fingers are at the same angle. When directly lifting a patient, tightly grip the place in the manner that you will ensure not to lose grasp of the patient. So like pants are always good, the belt's always good. Usually like if there's like 2 or 3 of us, we'll have one on each shoulder, and then we'll put somebody at the foot so like the patient doesn't slide right out from under you as you're lifting them up. Body drags, we don't really do that a lot, but you just kind of same thing. You want to, I guess, instead of lifting a patient, you're going to be dragging them. Like, or usually, like we'll put a blanket underneath them, like do a log roll, tuck a blanket under the log roll on the other side and pull it. But we can move. I guess we can move them like that. But you want to keep your back straight and like pull, like always engage your core, your abdominals to, and that kind of aligns your spine more, because if you're not pulling all that extra weight, like you just want to drag, when you do drag, you just want to drag a few feet. Yep. So like each side of the patient, like if you go for unresponsive people, like in the weirdest, like in the bathroom in the corner, you're gonna have to kind of drag them out. And there's one person on each side, and they're crouched down, and there's a lot of communication. Like they're gonna talk about when they're gonna do it. They're gonna 1, 2, 3, okay, move. So yeah, kneel, don't reach, because the more you reach, the more pressure puts on your back. Complete. Oh yeah, so yeah, we pull patients out of beds all the time, and we try to keep it level and have the stretcher level with the bed. So yeah, we always, like if we can, we use a sheet or a blanket under the patient. Like I went for an unresponsive patient the other day, and she was just happened to be on her like left side, and there was a blanket right on the couch. I grabbed the blanket, threw it under her, rolled her over, and she was, there you go, she was on the blanket. We were able to pick her up and put her on a scoop, which is more rigidity, so we could carry her out easier. So we're gonna go for, like, if we're gonna move the patient from the stretcher some way, we're gonna transport the patient into the ambulance, and then like we're gonna kind of do the same thing, like use a draw sheet or whatever it's called that's underneath the patient, and then pull them over onto the bed at the hospital as well. And if there's shorter people, like nurses or providers, like you do it in increments. You like kind of go halfway, they can readjust, climb on the bed, whatever they need to do, and then do another increment, and then or either that or finish it off. Like we do that a lot if there's a bigger patient or a taller patient. So log rolling, we do that a lot to, it's safer for the patient, and the guy at the head, he usually is telling everybody else what to do, and he's holding C-spine. So you just kind of like, there's a technique you can do, like you just move one leg over the other, like in front, and just kind of roll them. You can do it like by yourself, but it's easier with more people. Again, like kneel close, keep your back straight, roll the patient without stopping. Like you don't want to have their head flop all around either, because it'll cause cervical problems. Whenever possible, use a lifting device. So like we use a scoop a lot if they're unresponsive. There's Reeves, there's other things out there. Whenever possible, yeah. Or like if we're on a second, third story, or if we're gonna use steps, we're gonna use a stair chair, which I think is coming up. Estimate the patient's weight. So you kind of like have to have thought process of it. So if like I'm with a partner who's like 6'6", who I work with sometimes, like I'm not gonna be so call for help, but I have another female partner I work with, so I'll call for the fire department to make sure, like as soon as I know like we have to move the patient and all, I'll just call them. So yeah, for providers to lift, and usually I feel it after if we have to pick somebody up off the floor. Do not attempt a patient weighs more than 250 pounds with fewer than 4 providers. That's funny. Sorry. Yeah, you shouldn't be lifting heavy people. And like special bariatric, we do have patients that are pretty big, and so we have our stretchers can carry up to like 700 pounds, I think. But it's hard on the equipment. So you gotta know your equipment and how to use it, and get people coming if you need them. Lifting and carrying people on the backboard. Usually, like if it's a big person, they'll put like 2 people at the front. 2 people at the head, 2 people at the feet, and like however many you have in between. But most of the weights are going to be at the head, and not as much as at the feet. They call it like a diamond carry, but then if you have to go through doorways or whatever, it goes out the window. And there have been times like you just make sure the patient's strapped in, and we'll just put them on the floor and slide them down the stairs. So no, I mean you got to make sure you take care of yourselves. So that's an example of the diamond carry. There's one at the head, one at the foot, and one on either side. And backboards always bend, especially if they're really big people. So again, use 4 providers. Usually, even when rolling it, if we're really rolling on uneven terrain, there should be like 4 people as well. You don't want to be that person that hits a rock and knocks them all over, or in the grass, it's really hard. And if you're on even terrain, if you're like on grass or whatever, it should be lowered if there's gravel, because it lowers the center of balance. But if you're like in the hospital or if you actually do bring it in a house, you can have it all the way up, so it's easier to maneuver. So that's a stair chair. We use it all the time. So that's a Furno stair chair. So that's what we have to use to carry people downstairs. I used one last night because it was over a lot of grass and it was raining, so the ground was soft. So we carried the patient out to the ambulance on a stair chair. It was like 50 yards, but she was a tiny person. Well, I think we'll try to use it when we do our practical on Sunday if it's good with Kevin. So moving a patient with the stairs on a stretcher, yeah, you can't use a stair chair like person who's unresponsive. It will close their airway down, and they just get floppy, and people get hurt. So usually we'll use a scoop, or if they're light, we'll just use a blanket and carry them out. Carrying a patient on the backboard, yeah, like you want to kind of keep it at a good height for putting a patient on the back from a backboard to the stretcher. Like you don't want it all the way up, but you don't also want it all the way at the bottom. The strongest EMT is at the head because it's more weight. And the people at the head and the feet are carrying the brunt of the weight. The people on the sides are usually just the stabilizers. So that's a semi-Fowler's position with a striker. See, that one's a power lift. Yeah, make sure like there. Oh, do I have the? Hold on. Oh, what did I do? So there's like a bar at the top. I don't know if you can see it. Like, right next to his glove, there's a bar. And you need to make sure that's like attached before you like try to lift the patient up into the ambulance or taking it out. Or sometimes they will, if you don't, it's not catch and you pull them out, it'll just hit right to the ground. It's not good. What did I do? Oh my gosh.
So while Morgan tries to
Technical
minimize it
difficulties. Is that
on
what
the
it means?
striker power cots or striker stair chairs, anything that has a red handle or cable is a movable part. That's why they designed them. So if you want to lower down the handrails, you pull up with the red handle. If you want to move in the back, you pull up the red handle. Remove the battery, push the red button. So that's kind of how those work. Anything with striker, red cables are moving parts of the strikers.
Yeah, the red parts, and you got to watch the pinch zones too, because that hurts.
Especially when they're hydraulic and they just keep moving.
Yeah, that hurts. I've done it once. All right, shoulder frame is held firmly between two hands. So yeah, we don't want to do that. Tipping patients over is embarrassing. Loading a wheeled stretcher into the ambulance continued. Newer models of self-loading. Yeah, Errol has a self-loader. I love it, but when it doesn't work, it's a pain. But Berlin's has, I guess they call it a semi-loader. It works ish, but you still have to lift, and like you should have one person on each side of the foot to just take the weight. Clamps on the ambulance hold the stretcher in place. Yeah, newer ambulances have clamps. Older ambulances have what they call yokes to keep them in place. How about we
want to stop here?
Yeah.
Yeah, that works. So maybe at least touch up a couple things before we close out for the night. And then we'll just take off from directions and commands on Thursday. So Sunday the 24th is going to be your first practical session. You will be covering patient assessment that day. So Morgan, you and Scott will be doing patient assessment with those guys. So blood pressures, vital signs, things like that, going over the patient assessment. It doesn't have to be detailed. Again, it'll just be the basic, ABCs, looking at your primary and secondary assessments for the generic patient. We're not really going to tailor cardiac assessment, respiratory assessment yet until we cover those chapters. October 1st, it will be CPR day. So I will be present for that class because I'm going to be doing the CPR class for you guys up there. If you currently have an AHA BLS CPR card and it's valid till the end of the class, you do not have to attend the morning portion of the CPR class. CPR will run from 8 to 11. We're going to break for lunch, and then at noontime, we're running from noon to 5 for more hands-on. So if you already have CPR and it's valid AHA BLS, then you can show up at noontime instead of being there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Or 9. Why did I say 8? 9. So with that being said, on Thursday, you guys want to get your readings done. We're going to be covering, finishing up this chapter here, which you shouldn't have too much more to go with this. And then we're doing medical terminology and then human body. The human body is in depth. You guys are going to learn a lot about anatomy, physiology, and that will go into your patient assessment and how we're going to look at what we're actually touching. We're going to cover it, and then we're actually going to be doing our assessments hands-on. So as you're palpating the abdomen, I expect you to be able to tell me where the liver, the stomach, the large intestines, small intestines, things like that. Appendix, liver, spleen, kidneys, and all. So again, read the human body chapter. Definitely go more in detail with that one there. Medical terminology, that's what we're going to be writing run reports with. So just be ready for Thursday for the lectures with that. Feel free to ask Morgan questions, and I'm hoping to have somebody else as well. I will not be in class on Thursday, as I have a study session I have to be after my critical care exam. So I have to be there. Once I clear that study session, I'll jump on, but I have to make sure I'm in there by 7. So unless you guys have any questions for me, remember that your quiz closes Friday. For those of you who have not done your acceptance of the waiver of liability and the student manual, you guys need to get those done as soon as possible. Only 5 people so far have submitted them. So please make sure you get those done and submitted in through the forms that I sent you. And don't wait on getting your medical evaluations done and your HPSO insurance for clinical rotations. So once we finish,
when are the clinical rotations?
The clinical rotations will start after we finish patient assessment and airway management. So after September 24th, we can start clinicals. Then you've gone over how to do an assessment. We can start getting ready. So I would say after October 1st, once you get CPR, you can start your clinicals. Then you have about a month and a half to complete 36 hours, 10 assessments. So I would give a definitive date of October 1st. Once you clear that, you can start doing your clinical rotations on the ambulance. But I have to have a copy of your HPSO, and I have to have a copy of your health evaluations being completed.
And can you refresh me again where you recommended we do the HPSO?
So it's HPSO is the company you can get them from. So it's
Okay.
HPSO health insurance for malpractice. They offer 2 different plans. One plan is for as a student. I want to say it's like $35 or $40. It's not much. And then you can also get one once you finish. You can go into a non-student. I want to say it's like $160 a year, but it gives you a $3 million umbrella. So if you screw something up at the back of the ambulance, you have some coverage for you for malpractice. It's definitely worth spending $100-something a year to save yourself a $3 million lawsuit. So I just need copies of those.
Okay.
And once we get that stuff in, we can start our clinical rotations. And then you just need to know where you're going to ride. If you're going to do Stewart's ambulance, Berlin, or Action ambulance, we just got to be able to get you into those times. So once you give me your site you want to ride at, I will put you in touch with the correct person you need to contact to set up your clinical ride time. And then once you have it set up, just give me the dates that you're doing those. But I know I'm going to let you guys go here in about 2 seconds. When we meet in person on October 1st, we'll also at noontime go over kind of like a clinical meeting really quick before you guys start as well. But that's all I have for you. Morgan, you got anything else?
I don't know. Does anybody have any questions about what we went over?
Nope. All right. Well, that's all I have for you. You guys have a great night.
Thanks.
All right.
Have a nice
Have a
evening.
great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.